The morning began like any other for Daniel Cross, a man whose name was whispered with equal parts admiration and envy in boardrooms across the country. From the top floor of the Cross Enterprises Tower, he could see the whole city laid out before him, a glittering maze of ambition, deals, and deadlines. His calendar was stacked so tightly that even the smallest delay could unravel an entire day's work. The kind of man Daniel had become left no room for surprises, or so he thought. The elevator chimed softly outside his office. He barely glanced up, expecting his assistant to arrive with the usual coffee and briefing folder. Instead, the door eased open and in stepped two children, no taller than his desk, their small shoes squeaking against the marble floor. They didn't knock. They didn't hesitate. They just walked in. Daniel set down his pen. The older boy looked about 9, his face pale, but his chin lifted as though he'd practiced being brave. The younger, maybe 6, kept close to his side, clutching a dented metal lunchbox as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. The taller one spoke first, his voice calm but edged with something that caught Daniel off guard. "We need a job. It's urgent." Daniel blinked. A job? He leaned back slowly in his chair, trying to understand what exactly he was looking at. These weren't the usual visitors to his office. "Where are your parents?" The boys exchanged a quick glance. The younger one shifted his weight, eyes flicking to the floor, but the older held Daniel's gaze. "Our mom's in the hospital," he said. "She needs an operation, and we have to pay for it before they'll do it." Daniel's grip tightened on the armrest. "And your father?" The older boy hesitated for only a second. "It's just her." Something in his tone, not the words, but the way he said them, pulled at a place Daniel had long forgotten existed. In business, he had learned to read people instantly, to sense when someone was lying or performing, but these boys weren't acting. "How did you get here?" he asked quietly. The younger one finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We walked." It was then Daniel noticed their shoes scuffed, worn thin at the soles, one with a loose lace that had been knotted over and over. His mind caught on that detail, the way it often did when something mattered more than it seemed. The older boy unfolded the crumpled paper he'd been carrying and held it out with both hands. Daniel reached across his desk and took it. It was a bill from the hospital, the total printed in bold at the bottom. Even in his world of vast numbers, it was a sum that would crush anyone without means. The room felt strangely quiet, the city sounds beyond the glass muted as Daniel read. "Why? Come here?" he asked finally, looking up. "Because we saw you in the newspaper," the older boy said. "It said you help people, and we thought you might help us." Daniel sat back, studying their faces. There was something there, a strange familiarity he couldn't place, like a memory he had lost, but that was trying to push its way back. He felt it in the tilt of the older boy's head, in the way the younger's eyes lingered on the window as though measuring the distance to the world beyond. In his career, Daniel had been asked for money more times than he could count. But this wasn't a request, it was a mission. These boys hadn't come to beg, they had come to work, and without quite knowing why, Daniel felt the day he thought he'd planned unraveling right in front of him. He gestured toward the leather chairs by the window. "Sit down," he said softly. "Tell me everything." They obeyed without question, the younger boy setting his lunchbox carefully on the chair beside him as though it, too, needed a safe place to rest. As they began to speak, halting at first, then more quickly, Daniel felt something shift inside him. The story they carried was heavier than their small shoulders should bear, and as he listened, he couldn't shake the feeling that their arrival in his office was not an accident at all, but the beginning of something that would change all three of their lives forever. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, elbows resting on his knees, his attention locked entirely on the two boys, the city, the meetings, the waiting calls, all of it faded to a distant hum. The older boy introduced himself as Noah, and the younger as Liam. Their voices carried a mixture of determination and exhaustion, like they had already lived through more than most adults. Noah spoke first. "It started a few months ago. Mom would get tired really fast. At first, she just said it was because she was working too much." She cleans offices at night and helps at a store in the mornings. But then she started coughing, and sometimes she had to sit down even when she was just walking from the kitchen to the front door. Liam nodded, his small hands fidgeting with the handle of the lunchbox. She told us not to worry. But we knew something was wrong. Daniel listened without interrupting. It wasn't the kind of story he could skim through in his mind like a report. Every word felt weighted, like each sentence was a stone being placed carefully in his hands. One morning, Noah continued, she collapsed while we were getting ready for school. We called for help, the ambulance came, and they took her to the hospital. That's when they told us about her heart. They said she needs surgery as soon as possible. But he paused, pulling in a breath. They won't do it until we can pay for it. We don't have that kind of money, so we decided to find someone who could help us earn it. Daniel's jaw tightened. You walked here from where? Liam looked up. From our apartment. It's far. How far? Across the river, Noah said. 2 buses, but we didn't have the fare. So we just walked. Daniel glanced toward the window, picturing the route in his mind. That was miles of streets, bridges, and traffic. For children this young, it wasn't just far, it was dangerous. He studied their faces again. The fatigue was there, hidden beneath their brave expressions. Why didn't you ask someone closer to home? He asked. We don't have anyone, Noah said simply. Mom didn't want to tell people because she doesn't like to be a burden. Liam spoke again, his voice so soft it almost vanished. But we can't just wait. We can work. We can do anything. We're good at carrying things, and we can clean. Daniel sat back, feeling a strange pull in his chest. These boys didn't come looking for charity. They came offering themselves, ready to work for what they needed. There was a courage in that which he rarely saw, even among adults who came to him for help. What's in the lunchbox? He asked, curious. Liam's fingers tightened around it. Our lunch. Mom packed it before she got sick enough to stay in the hospital. We've been saving it. That detail hit Daniel harder than he expected. Saving a lunch, walking miles, holding on to hope like it was the only thing they had left. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it on the table between them. This is all we have, he said. Daniel didn't move to touch it. How much is in there? $6.20. The number sat in the space between them. Small yet impossibly heavy. In Daniel's world, $6 couldn't buy a cup of coffee at the hotel downstairs. But for these boys, it was everything. The sum of their effort, their hope, their belief that if they could just reach the right person, something might change. Daniel exhaled slowly. I want to meet your mother, he said at last. Noah and Liam exchanged another glance, but this time there was something new in their eyes, a flicker of cautious hope. Can you take me to her? They both nodded. Daniel rose from his chair, already knowing that this was not going to be a problem he could delegate or solve with a quick check. Something about this encounter had dug deep. He had made a career out of decisions based on logic, strategy, and numbers. But this was a decision his head couldn't make. Only his heart could. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross was ready to follow it. The ride to the hospital was quiet. The kind of quiet that carries weight. Daniel had sent a quick message to his assistant to clear his morning schedule, then personally escorted Noah and Liam to his car. The boys sat in the back, side by side, their small hands resting on their knees. Liam kept glancing out the window, watching the city pass by, while Noah stared straight ahead as if memorizing every turn they took. Daniel found himself stealing glances at them in the rearview mirror. They were so young, yet there was a steadiness in their posture, the kind that only comes when life forces you to grow up before you're ready. He wondered what it would have been like for them if they'd had the childhood he once imagined for himself before business had consumed his life. The hospital loomed into view, a gray building softened only by the green of a small courtyard. As they walked in, the sterile scent of disinfectant met them immediately. Liam's grip on his lunchbox tightened. Noah kept his chin high, though Daniel noticed the quick dart of his eyes as they passed the reception desk and winding hallways. When they reached the room, Noah paused at the door. She might be sleeping, he whispered, as if to prepare Daniel for the sight. Inside, The sunlight through the narrow window fell across a figure in the bed. She was thinner than he expected, her skin pale, her breathing slow but steady, even. Without opening her eyes, there was a quiet dignity about her. "Mom," Noah said softly. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, her gaze landed on her son's, and the faintest smile curved her lips. Then her eyes shifted to Daniel. Something unreadable passed across her face: surprise, curiosity, maybe even a hint of caution. "This is Mr. Cross," Noah explained quickly. He's the one we told you about." Her voice was soft, but carried a strength that caught Daniel off guard. "You've brought a stranger to my bedside," Liam spoke up, almost in a rush. "He's not a stranger. He wants to help." Daniel stepped closer, his usual confidence tempered by an unfamiliar sense of carefulness. "Mrs. Hale," he began, "I'm here because your sons came to my office this morning asking for work. They told me about your condition." A shadow of worry passed over her features. "They walked all that way?" Daniel nodded. "They were determined." She looked back at them, and in that moment, Daniel could see it. The fierce love she carried for them. The silent fears she kept hidden so they wouldn't bear them too. "I'm sorry they troubled you," she said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "We'll manage, we always do." Noah leaned forward. "Mom, please, we can't wait. You need the surgery." Daniel could sense she was about to argue, so he spoke gently but directly. "I've read your medical summary. This isn't something that can wait. I want to help, not as a favor, but because your boys came to me ready to work for it. That says something about who they are, and who raised them for the first time." She seemed at a loss for words. She turned her face toward the window. Blinking slowly, Daniel couldn't tell if it was to hide tears or to find strength. Noah and Liam stood quietly, each watching her with the same intensity, as if waiting for a single nod to change everything. Finally, she looked back. "I can't take charity," she said softly. "This isn't charity," Daniel replied. "Consider it an investment, in them, in you. They've already proven they're willing to fight for you. I'd like to stand with them." The room fell into a stillness that felt almost sacred. Daniel wasn't used to waiting for answers. In his world, decisions were made quickly, signed, sealed, and done. But here, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. When she finally spoke, it was barely louder than a whisper. "If you're serious, then we accept." Noah exhaled sharply, relief flooding his face. Liam hugged his lunchbox tighter, a smile breaking through for the first time that day. Daniel felt something shift inside him. This wasn't a business deal. It wasn't a headline waiting to happen. It was a promise, one he had no intention of breaking. As he stepped out into the hallway to make a call, the thought crossed his mind that his life had just taken a turn he could never have predicted. And deep down, he knew he didn't want to go back. The call was short, but the decision it carried was not. Daniel contacted a trusted friend at the city's top cardiac clinic, explaining the situation in measured words that still managed to carry urgency. The friend didn't ask many questions, only promised to arrange an immediate consultation and block an operating room if the surgeon agreed. It was the kind of favor Daniel rarely asked for, and never for himself. When he returned to the room, the boys were sitting on the edge of their mother's bed, one on each side, speaking to her in low voices. She was smiling faintly now, though fatigue still weighed heavy on her face. Daniel waited until their conversation quieted before he stepped closer. "I've spoken to a specialist," he said gently. "They can see you tomorrow morning. We'll get you transferred to their clinic." She started to protest, but her voice faltered when she saw the hope in her son's eyes. Daniel could tell she was still wrestling with the idea of accepting help, but the urgency in her situation left little room for hesitation. "How much will it cost?" she asked, her tone cautious, "Enough that your boys shouldn't have to carry that weight." Daniel replied, "It's handled." The silence that followed was not just about money. It was about trust, something far more difficult to give than a signature on a check. After a long pause, she nodded. Arrangements moved quickly after that. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the hospital in a black sedan, helping coordinate the transfer while the boys clutched their small bags of belongings. Liam still carried his lunchbox, as though it was a part of him. Noah kept asking questions about the clinic, trying to understand every step ahead. At the new facility, the difference was immediate: warmer lighting, a quieter atmosphere, and staff who greeted them by name. The surgeon, a calm man with a quiet voice, explained the procedure in detail. Daniel noticed that while Mrs. Hale listened carefully, her eyes kept flicking to her sons, gauging their reactions more than her own. When the consultation ended, Daniel led the boys to the small cafe in the lobby while their mother underwent more tests. They sat at a corner table, surrounded by the soft hum of conversation from other families. Daniel ordered them sandwiches and hot chocolate, though. Noah insisted they didn't need anything. "You do," Daniel said simply, placing the food in front of them. "It's not just your mother who needs strength right now. For a few minutes." They ate quietly. Then Liam asked the question Daniel had been expecting. "Why are you helping us?" Daniel leaned back, considering his answer. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't think anyone would. And because you came to me ready to work for what you needed instead of just asking for it. That's rare. That's worth standing behind." Noah studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "We'll find a way to pay you back." Daniel didn't tell them that wasn't necessary. He could see they needed to believe it was, that they wanted to be more than a story of rescue. Later that afternoon, the boys were allowed back into their mother's room. She looked tired but calmer, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. She thanked Daniel again, this time without argument, and he could tell it cost her something to do so. That night, Daniel stayed longer than he'd planned. He spoke quietly with the nurses, ensuring she would have everything she needed for the night. As he walked out into the cool evening air, his phone buzzed with reminders of the meetings he'd missed, the deals waiting for his attention. For the first time in years, none of it felt urgent. On the drive home, his mind replayed the boys' determined faces as they'd stepped into his office that morning. He realized that no matter what happened next, their story had already become a part of his own. And somewhere deep down, a thought began to form, one that would take root and grow in the days ahead. Maybe helping them wasn't just about saving their mother. Maybe it was about saving something in himself that he hadn't even realized was lost. The morning of the surgery came faster than anyone expected. The clinic's halls were hushed, with only the soft sounds of wheels on tile and the muted beeps of machines in distant rooms. Daniel arrived before sunrise, coffee in hand. Though he hadn't slept much, he found Noah and Liam in the waiting area, both wearing the same clothes as the day before, their hair slightly messy from a night spent in the small family lounge. Liam was holding the lunchbox again. Daniel had started to wonder if it was more than just a place to store food. Perhaps it carried something he hadn't been told about yet. Noah sat upright in the stiff chair, his knees bouncing, trying to look calm for his younger brother's sake. "She's in pre-op," Daniel said, softly, sitting down beside them. "The surgeon says everything is ready." Noah nodded, but his jaw tightened. "They said there's still a risk." "There's always risk," Daniel replied, his voice low and steady. "But she's in the best hands now. You did everything you could to make this happen." For a long moment, they just sat there, the three of them, while the sky outside turned from deep gray to pale gold. The nurse came to get the boys so they could see their mother before the procedure. Daniel followed, staying just inside the doorway of the room. Mrs. Hale was already in a gown, her hair tucked under a cap, monitors softly ticking beside her. Yet when she saw her sons, her entire expression changed. The fatigue and fear melted, replaced by warmth. She reached for their hands. "You've both been so brave," she told them. "Whatever happens today, I want you to remember that you've already given me more than I could ever ask for." Liam's voice trembled. "We just want you to come home." Daniel looked away for a moment, giving them the space for words that weren't his to share. But even as he stood back, he could feel the weight of the moment pressing against him. He had been in countless boardrooms where millions were on the line, but nothing had ever felt as fragile or important as this. When the surgical team arrived, Noah and Liam clung to her one last time before letting go. Daniel guided them gently out to the waiting room, where the hours ahead stretched long and uncertain. Time in the waiting room moved strangely, slow when you wanted it to pass, fast when you wished you could hold on to a moment. Daniel tried to keep the boys occupied. He showed them photos on his phone of places he had traveled, telling brief stories about the people he'd met there. Liam listened closely, asking questions about faraway cities, while Noah kept glancing toward the doors leading to the operating wing. After nearly 3 hours, a nurse appeared, asking for Daniel by name. The boys instantly stood, their eyes wide. The nurse's expression was calm, and relief flooded the air like a quiet tide. "She's stable," the nurse said. "The surgery went well. She's in recovery now, but it will be a few hours before you can see her." Noah's shoulders sagged, and Liam let out a sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh. Daniel placed a hand lightly on each of their backs. "She's going to be all right," he said. They sat back down, the tension finally easing. Liam opened his lunchbox, revealing not just food, but a small folded photograph tucked in the corner. Daniel glanced at it, a faded picture of the three of them together in a park from years earlier. The edges were worn, as if it had been handled many times. "She always keeps it on the table by her bed," Liam explained. "But when she went to the hospital, I put it in here so we wouldn't lose it." Daniel studied the photo, feeling something stir in him again. The way small objects could hold entire worlds. He handed it back with care. When the boys were finally allowed into the recovery room, Daniel stayed by the door, watching as they leaned close to whisper to their mother. She was still groggy, but her hand found theirs immediately, as if that simple touch was all she needed to know she was safe. Standing there, Daniel realized this was more than just a story of helping someone through a crisis. It was about what came after, the life they could return to, the future they could still build. And though he had no obligation to stay beyond today, the thought of walking away felt impossible. Somewhere deep down, he knew that his involvement in their lives wasn't ending here. It was only beginning. Asterisk recovery took time, but every day brought a little more strength back to her. Daniel visited often, always finding Noah and Liam nearby, reading aloud from borrowed books, helping her sit up, or just sitting quietly. Their presence enough to keep her company. The clinic staff began to greet them like family, their story having traveled through the halls in whispers and smiles. One crisp morning, a week after the surgery, Mrs. Hale was well enough to be discharged. The boys moved quickly through the room, packing her few belongings with care. Liam made sure the photograph was back on the bedside table, as if returning it to its rightful place was the last step. Before she could leave, Daniel arrived with the car waiting outside. The sunlight caught in the glass as they stepped through the clinic's doors, and for a moment, the world seemed sharper, brighter. The drive to their apartment was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because each of them was holding on to the feeling of the moment, letting it settle in. When they reached their building, Daniel noticed the worn steps, the chipped paint on the railing. The apartment inside was small but clean, every corner speaking of effort and care. The boys helped their mother to the couch, and she sat with a sigh that was part relief, part exhaustion. Daniel glanced around, taking in the details, the neat stack of school books on the table, the folded laundry on the chair, the scent of fresh soap in the air. It wasn't luxury, but it was home, and yet, he couldn't shake the thought that they deserved more than just making ends meet. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice careful. "Your boys have shown more determination than many adults I've worked with. I'd like to offer them something, not charity, but an opportunity." Noah's eyes narrowed slightly. Cautious, "What kind of opportunity?" "A mentorship," Daniel said. "Part-time work at my company after school, learning real skills. And for you," he added, looking at Mrs. Hale, "a position on our facilities team once you're fully recovered. Steady hours, benefits, a wage that will cover more than the basics." Mrs. Hale's lips parted in surprise. "That's a lot." "It's what you've earned," Daniel replied. "You raised the boys who walked across the city for you. That says more than any resume ever could." There was a long pause. The boys exchanged a look, not one of hesitation, but of disbelief turning into something brighter. Mrs. Hale's gaze softened, her voice quieter now. "You've already done so much for us. This isn't just for you," Daniel said. "It's for me, too. You reminded me what it means to fight for something that matters." I don't want to lose that lesson. They talked for hours that day about school schedules, about the kind of work the boys could do without it affecting their grades, about her recovery and when she could start. By the time Daniel left, there was a different air in the apartment. It wasn't just gratitude. It was possibility. Weeks passed. The boys began their part-time roles, shadowing employees, asking questions, absorbing everything. Mrs. Hale joined the facilities team, her health improving steadily. Daniel saw them often, and each time he did, he was struck by the change, not just in their circumstances, but in the way they carried themselves one evening. As the sun dipped low over the skyline, Noah stopped by Daniel's office with Liam. In tow, they placed the lunchbox on his desk. "What's this?" Daniel asked, smiling. Liam opened it to reveal the same photograph he had guarded so fiercely, now in a simple wooden frame. "We thought it should be here," he said. "So you remember why we came." Daniel looked at the photo, then at them. "I don't think I'll ever forget." And in that moment, he realized the truth. Helping them hadn't just changed their lives, it had changed his. They had reminded him that even in a world built on numbers and deals, the most valuable investments were made in people, and those returns, unlike any profit margin, could last a lifetime.